began with a flash no one could explain. In the dead silence of space, just beyond Earth, 3I Atlas, a fragment from another star, suddenly erupted as it passed the moon. Not from the sun's heat, not from cosmic radiation, but as if the moon itself had triggered it. Telescopes caught its coma twisting like a living thing, pulsing in rhythm, before fading back into darkness. The moon has no atmosphere, no magnetism, no power to stir a comet, and yet it did. Coincidence or contact? What happened near the moon may change everything we thought we knew. The first time 3I Atlas appeared in the night sky, it already carried a secret. At first, it was nothing more than a faint dot logged by Chile's survey telescopes, a routine entry in the endless scroll of moving points that cross astronomers' screens each night. But when its motion was calculated, the numbers told a story no one expected. This was not a child of our Sunday. It was an interstellar traveler, racing in on a hyperbolic path from the dark between the stars. Only 2 such visitors had ever been confirmed before: Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, and now, in 2025, a third had arrived. Scientists should have been celebrating, but instead, unease began to spread. Its velocity was too high, its brightness too volatile. And, most unsettling of all, its coma stirred to life, long before it reached the warmth of the inner solar system. Why was 3I Atlas awake when comets should still be frozen solid? What was powering this phantom glow? The ratios of carbon dioxide to water detected in its gases were extreme, far beyond the chemistry we know from native comets. Nickel appeared in spectra without its usual partner, iron. Each fact alone could be stretched to fit a natural model, but together, they painted the outline of something else, a puzzle piece from a game we didn't know we were playing. Publicly, agencies downplayed the oddities. NASA reassured the press. Harmless, fascinating, no danger to Earth. The European Southern Observatory echoed the same. But behind the calm words, in late-night calls between astronomers, another tone emerged. Why was it venting so early? Why did its chemistry look engineered, not random? And why, by sheer chance, was its course set to thread directly through the Earth-Moon system with uncanny precision? Objects on hyperbolic paths should not aim. They wander, indifferent to alignments. Yet here was 3I Atlas, arcing toward the moon with accuracy that made even hardened dynamicists uncomfortable. And then came the moment that transformed suspicion into alarm. As it entered the Earth-Moon system, telescopes worldwide recorded a sudden flare. Its coma brightened violently, twisted as if writhing, and then pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat in the void. Not aligned with solar heating, not at perihelion, but timed exactly with its closest pass to the moon. The moon has no atmosphere, no magnetosphere, no power to trigger such a response. So what made 3I Atlas erupt in its presence? Coincidence or contact? The data poured in. Chile, Hawaii, Europe, all confirmed the flare. Amateurs with backyard setups confirmed it too. There was no error, no detector glitch. The pulse was real. For hours, 3I Atlas seemed to notice the moon. And if it noticed the moon, what else might it notice? For scientists, it was a nightmare scenario. Too strange to ignore, too dangerous to speculate aloud. Official lines remained cautious, but whispers spread of signals, of probes disguised as comets, of surveillance missions hidden in plain sight. The questions deepened. If this was merely natural, why now? Why here? Why in perfect synchrony with the moon, our oldest companion? That is the first glimpse the moment 3I Atlas stopped being a comet and became a mystery. A visitor from another star, flaring where no physics said it should, leaving behind one question we cannot escape: what really happened near the moon? And to answer that, we must pull deeper into the mathematics of its orbit, because the path of 3I Atlas hides clues that may decide whether it is just passing through, or whether it came here with intent. From the moment 3I Atlas was tracked, its path told a story no comet should ever tell. In astronomy, orbits are like fingerprints, unique yet predictable, the signature of every object bound by gravity's silent law, and most comets, asteroids, and planetary debris follow ellipses, the closed loops that mark them as children of our Sunday. But 3I Atlas traced something different, a hyperbola, a curve that does not close, a trajectory that screams exile. Why would an object appear from the black between stars, thread through our solar system at breathtaking speed, and then vanish forever? The mathematics are merciless. Astronomers describe it as orbital eccentricity, a number that tells you how stretched an orbit is. Perfect circles score a 0. Ellipses creep higher, until 1 marks the limit of a bound path. Anything greater than 1 means freedom, an unchained traveller. Oumuamua's eccentricity was 1.2, Borisov's a little higher. But 3I Atlas, more than 1.3, faster and less tethered than either of its predecessors. This was not an object just barely escaping the sun's pull. It was an object that would never have been caught in the first place. That speed is staggering to imagine. At closest approach, 3I Atlas rushed inward at over 130 kilometers per second, fast enough to cross the continental United States in less than a minute, fast enough to leave Earth's orbit in the time it takes to boil water, and fast enough that no conceivable rocket humanity has ever built could even dream of chasing it. Gravity bent its path, yes, but only slightly. This was no captured body. It was a visitor, a tourist who would never return. At least, that was what the math said, and yet the more astronomers studied its orbit, the less ordinary it looked. The hyperbolic trajectory wasn't just fast, it was unusually precise. Its inbound vector traced back not to the crowded plane of the Milky Way's disk, where debris typically drifts, but from a higher, older population, known as the thick disk stars billions of years old, relics of the galaxy's youth. Was 3I Atlas a fossil from the dawn of galactic history, flung free in some ancient collision, or was its entry path too precise to dismiss as random violence? To the untrained eye, orbital plots are just lines on paper, but to those who read them, they whisper intention. 3I Atlas didn't just wander in. Its trajectory threaded a corridor between Mars and Earth with uncanny timing, its closest pass arriving not during a lull in our observational capacity, but at the very moment when our instruments were most ready, our telescopes most watchful. Coincidence or choreography? If you were designing a probe to be noticed without revealing itself outright, you could hardly have chosen better. NASA and ESA, of course, took pains to emphasize the safety. At no point would 3I Atlas approach Earth, closer than hundreds of thousands of kilometers, safe even compared to the distance of the Moon. Its flyby would be spectacular, they said, but harmless. And yet, even in those words, a subtle disquiet lingered, because while the orbit proved no danger, it also proved no kinship. 3I Atlas was not ours. It belonged to another star, another system, another epoch. Its passage was a reminder that the void is not empty, that fragments from elsewhere can and do arrive. And in the data of its trajectory lay one more unsettling truth. This was the third interstellar visitor detected in less than a decade. If space were truly sparse, if such objects were cosmic accidents, how could we have seen 3 in such quick succession? What if the galaxy is not quiet at all, but teeming with wanderers, and we are only just beginning to notice? Consider the acceleration problem. Comets often veer slightly from purely gravitational paths, nudged by jets of gas as sunlight warms their surfaces. But those nudges are messy, random, unpredictable. With 3I Atlas, the non-gravitational accelerations aligned too neatly, too consistently. Models could stretch to accommodate them, but some scientists whispered another possibility. What if they weren't random? What if the course corrections we saw were not chaos, but control? The mathematics does not care whether the thrust comes from vaporized ice or engineered propulsion. The orbit only shows deviation. And if the deviation is deliberate, then what we tracked was not just a rock from the stars, but a vessel. For now, the official answer remains simple. 3I Atlas is a comet, an icy body flung loose from its birth system billions of years ago, wandering until chance carried it here. But even the most cautious astronomers admit the probability is strange. To encounter 3 interstellar objects, so soon after building the tools to see them, suggests a population far denser than anyone believed. Our solar system, once thought quiet, may in fact be a crossroads, a place where countless messengers drift through, carrying with them the fingerprints of other suns, And if even one of those messengers were more than natural, the implications would shake the foundations of everything we know. So we are left with a paradox. The orbit of 3I Atlas proves it is no threat, but also no ordinary traveller. It moves too fast to be ours, too strangely to be dismissed, and too precisely to be ignored. Which leads to a question scientists dare not ask in public, but cannot silence in private. What if orbital mechanics are not just the language of gravity, but the fingerprints of intention? And if that possibility lingers, then we must look not only at the orbit itself, but at the chemistry within the comet's skin, because inside 3I Atlas, the anomalies only grow stranger. Every comet has a script. 3I Atlas refuses to follow it. In astronomy, comets are the old actors of the solar system, rehearsing the same performance for billions of years. They spend eons in deep freeze, drifting in silence, until the faint heat of the sun wakes them. At a predictable distance, their ices sublimate, jets roar from their surface, and a coma of gas and dust surrounds them, glowing in reflected sunlight. The patterns are so reliable that textbooks map them in neat diagrams. First water, then carbon monoxide, then carbon dioxide, each triggered by temperature in a sequence as old as the planets themselves. So why did 3I Atlas awaken long before it reached the sun's warmth, already blazing with a green shroud in the cold beyond Mars? At 3 astronomical units, where most comets are still slumbering, 3I Atlas burst into life. Its coma didn't just appear, it dominated, flooding detectors with carbon dioxide at levels nearly unprecedented. 80 parts CO, 2 for every 1 part water, a ratio that shattered expectations. The chemistry was so extreme that seasoned comet researchers called it absurd. Yes, cosmic rays can alter surface chemistry. Yes, dust mantles can trap water while letting other volatiles escape. But not like this. How do you explain a comet venting industrial-scale CO2 when no model predicts it? Oumuamua had been strange in shape, Borisov pristine in its activity, but 3I Atlas was rewriting the rules entirely. Its green coma glowed eerily, a phantom lantern visible through backyard telescopes. Amateur astronomers uploaded images that spread across forums, each one confirming what professionals already knew. This object was wrong. The rhythm of its activity did not match the slow breathing of comets. It pulsed, it flared, it dimmed, then surged again, as though under a hidden cycle. Was this chemical chaos, or the signature of some internal mechanism we cannot yet imagine? Telescopes piled on data. The Hubble confirmed the coma's unusual size, stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The James Webb caught spectra that revealed the strange ratios. Ground-based observatories tracked its brightness curve, which rose and fell like a heartbeat. And yet, none of this aligned with the textbook performance of a comet. The numbers looked engineered. If you wanted to mimic cometary activity while hiding something within, you could hardly choose better than a cloak of gases behaving almost but not quite like nature intended. Official explanations multiplied. Some argued 3I Atlas had formed near its parent star's CO2 snowline, where frozen carbon dioxide condensed more easily. Others suggested cosmic radiation over billions of years had transformed its crust into something exotic. Still others proposed insulating layers of dust had locked away water ice, leaving only CO2 to escape. Each theory fit a sliver of the puzzle, but none explained the whole. None explained the rhythm, none explained the moon flare. Why does every natural answer collapse when tested against the full set of observations? And as those questions mounted, another detail emerged: nickel without iron. In the chemistry of comets, metals travel in pairs. Nickel and iron form together, condense together, survive together. Yet in 3I Atlas, instruments saw nickel lines blazing, while iron remained faint or absent. Was it an error in detection? A quirk of viewing geometry? Or something that hinted at metallurgy beyond nature? How do you get nickel without iron unless it was separated deliberately? The question lingered, too dangerous for press releases, too irresistible to ignore. Through all this, agencies repeated the same calm refrain. 3I Atlas is harmless, 3I Atlas is fascinating, 3I Atlas is natural. But their tone betrayed them. Each update came hedged with caution, each statement shadowed by what they could not say aloud. because the truth was clear to anyone reading the raw numbers. 3. I Atlas did not behave like a comet at all. It behaved like something pretending to be one. And if it is pretending, then what is hidden behind the mask? That question haunted every conference call, every emergency session of astronomers trading encrypted notes across continents. The pattern was too strange to be dismissed, the anomalies too stacked to be coincidence. Some dared whisper the word probe, others speculated seeding, terraforming, a tool delivering volatiles to worlds. Still others invoked darker theories, surveillance cloaked in gas and dust, all of it taboo, yet none of it dismissible. The more we measured, the less we understood. That was the paradox. Science should clarify, but here each new data point sharpened the mystery. The comet's coma should tell us its story, its birthplace, its age. Instead, it whispered riddles, and above all loomed the single most disturbing detail, its flare near the moon. Because nothing in the science of comets explains why a body billions of years old would respond to a barren satellite in Earth's orbit. Coincidence or choreography, accident or intention. What we call a comet is supposed to be predictable, but 3I Atlas defied its role, stepping off the stage of cosmic certainty into a theatre of unknowns. And that forced a shift in thinking. If its orbit could not explain it, if its chemistry could not explain it, then perhaps its purpose could. Because when an object begins to behave as though it is aware of its surroundings, we must ask the question no one wants to. Is it alive, or is it guided? And to answer that, we must now turn to the first wave of anomalies that pushed astronomers from curiosity into alarm, the moment when 3I Atlas revealed behaviors no natural body should ever display. Every anomaly by itself might be explained. But 3I Atlas did not give us one anomaly, it gave us a cascade. From the moment its coma was first resolved, astronomers knew something was wrong. Comets, even interstellar ones, do not behave like this. They awaken slowly, breath by breath, as solar heating drives familiar reactions. But 3I Atlas was already venting with violent force while still far from the sun, glowing with a green shroud visible even through modest backyard telescopes. How could a body wandering in cold interstellar space ignite so early, so far from the star whose heat should have been its trigger? The numbers stunned researchers. Carbon dioxide dominated its spectrum at ratios almost never seen, nearly 80-1 compared to water. This was not a comet waking naturally. This was a body behaving as though built from another recipe entirely. Some called it the CO2 comet, others whispered of hidden engines, but none could deny the absurdity. Comets form with water as their heartbeat. Here, water was silent, CO2 roaring in its place. Is this chemistry the fingerprint of another star system? Or is it a signal, written in molecules, meant to be noticed? Then came the pulse. Brightness curves of comets usually follow smooth arcs, rise toward perihelion, fade after. But 3I Atlas flickered. It surged, dimmed, then surged again, like a cosmic heartbeat. Light curves looked alive, timed, cycling, as if under some hidden rhythm. Astronomers argued rotation could explain it, surface vents opening and closing as it spun. But the timing was too precise, the intervals too regular. When does geology mimic biology? When does physics start to look like intention? Next, the metals. Instruments teased out spectral lines that should not have been there. Nickel blazed in the data. Iron, its usual twin, did not. On Earth, in asteroids, in every comet we know, nickel and iron walk hand in hand. To see one without the other was like finding smoke without fire. Researchers debated contamination, observational error, quirks of angle, but the signature held: nickel without iron. A fingerprint unmatched by natural samples in our solar system. What process separates elements so neatly, unless it is designed to? Each of these anomalies strained credibility. Stacked together, they bent it to breaking. Official statements grew vaguer. Press releases softened the language. Unusual ratios, unexpected behavior. But beneath the careful phrasing, the truth was evident. No one had ever seen a comet behave like this, and still, the strangest anomaly was not chemical but choreographic. Its trajectory, already hyperbolic, already unbound, threaded through the solar system with uncanny timing. When mapped backward, its entry vector traced not from the plane of the galaxy, where debris usually drifts, but from the older, thicker disk above and below. Billions of years of galactic history condensed into a single messenger. If natural, it was extraordinary. If not, it was something else entirely, a delivery. Did 3i Atlas arrive by chance, or was it sent on a path calculated to intersect us exactly now, when our telescopes were watching? Oumuamua had been strange, Borisov pristine, but both ultimately passed as curiosities, enigmas left unresolved. 3i Atlas resisted that fate. Each observation made it stranger, not clearer. Each attempt at explanation collapsed under the weight of the next anomaly, and in every whispered conversation, the same fear took root. What if this was no accident? What if we were being observed? That fear only deepened when the anomalies multiplied. Radio telescopes probed for signals and found only silence, but the silence itself raised questions. Was it simply dead stone, or was it too advanced for us to detect? Its CO2 jets erupted not at random but in bursts that seemed patterned. Its coma expanded not as a diffuse cloud, but as structured veils, filaments, caught in ways that suggested geometry. Were these illusions, artifacts of observation, or glimpses of hidden order? At what point does coincidence become choreography? The public did not hear the details. Media headlines spoke only of another comet, fascinating, harmless, a reminder of cosmic vastness. But behind those headlines, the tone of private reports shifted. The anomalies could no longer be brushed aside as quirks. They had become a list, a dossier, a case file growing with each night of observation. And that case was about to take a darker turn, because as strange as early activation and impossible chemistry might be, the most terrifying anomaly was yet to come. It would not arrive in a spectrum or a curve, but in an event caught live by telescopes worldwide. The night 3i Atlas passed the moon and erupted, and that moment would turn a cosmic curiosity into a cosmic threat. On the night of September 18th, the impossible happened in plain view of Earth. 3i Atlas, racing through the black, with its strange chemistry and unpredictable pulse, reached the point astronomers had calculated, with absolute confidence, a pass just beyond the moon. They expected brightness, yes. They expected activity, yes. But what the telescopes recorded was nothing short of a rupture in the story of comets. Because as 3i Atlas skimmed past the silent grey face of the moon, it did not dim, it did not behave neutrally, it erupted. A flare of brightness so violent, it briefly outshone its predicted curve by a factor of 10. Its coma twisted, folded, and then began to pulse in rhythm. At first, data streams froze in disbelief. Automated scripts flagged the spike as error. Observers rebooted detectors. But within minutes, confirmations arrived from observatories across the globe. Chile saw it. Hawaii saw it. Europe saw it. Even amateurs, pointing modest scopes at the target, captured the same flicker. The flare was real. The pulse was real. And it happened not near the sun, not at perihelion, but at the exact moment 3i Atlas encountered the moon. Coincidence? Or choreography? The moon should have been irrelevant. It has no atmosphere to stir gases, no magnetosphere to distort tails, no gravity strong enough at that distance to trigger a crisis. By every law of orbital dynamics, the moon is a dead bystander. Yet for hours, 3i Atlas seemed to notice it. Its coma didn't just expand, it behaved as though responding, curling filaments toward the lunar disk, shimmering with faint green intensity. Spectrographs showed sudden changes in emission lines, spikes that suggested outbursts, timed not to sunlight, but to alignment. Why would a comet from another star notice a barren satellite that even our own Earth barely notices anymore? Inside observatories, panic wrestled with awe. Astronomers are trained to seek natural causes, to distrust speculation. But here, the numbers screamed defiance. Outgassing at this scale was unprecedented at that distance from the Sunday. The rhythm of the pulse resembled a signal, regular, timed, impossible to dismiss as random turbulence. Could it have been internal stresses? Vents cracking open in sequence? Perhaps. But why in sync with the moon? Why then, and not before? What mechanism links an interstellar body to Earth's satellite across empty space? The flare grew so intense that even naked-eye observers in rural skies reported a faint glow near the moon. Social media lit up with claims of the moon's new star, though few understood what they were seeing. Agencies scrambled to manage messaging. NASA issued a curt update. Transient activity observed. Non-hazardous. Monitoring continues. The European Southern Observatory followed with similar language. But those inside the control rooms knew better. They had seen the pulse, they had watched the data, and they were already whispering the question they could not speak aloud in public. Was this a signal? Imagine it. A probe disguised as a comet, dormant for eons, designed to awaken not at the sun's heat, but at a specific alignment. Earth's moon. A trigger. A beacon. The thought was too extraordinary to endorse, yet too precise to ignore. What if 3I Atlas had not flared because of heat, but because of recognition? As if some buried system had been programmed to react to a lunar presence, to acknowledge our solar system in a way no natural body ever could. And if that were true, then we were no longer watching a comet at all. We were watching an artifact. For 3 hours, the brightness held in strange, rhythmic waves. Then, as abruptly as it began, it faded. The coma dimmed, the pulse vanished, and 3I Atlas resumed its expected brightness curve as though nothing had happened. Telescopes tracked the afterglow, confirming no fragmentation, no disintegration, no natural event that could explain such violence. The flare had happened, and then it had ended, leaving only questions in its wake. The next morning, the world's astronomers were already at war with themselves. Some argued stress fractures in volatile-rich pockets had coincidentally aligned with the lunar pass. Others suggested electrostatic interactions, too subtle to model. But many stared at the data and felt something colder, intent. Because the flare had not been random, it had been timed, it had been rhythmic. And in the silence of space, rhythm means only one thing: information. What if the pulse was not chaos, but communication? What if the moon had been the trigger for a message we do not yet understand? The implications were staggering. A body travelling for billions of years, older than our sun, perhaps engineered, perhaps programmed, now awakening at the doorstep of Earth. Humanity has long dreamed of a signal from the stars, a message across the void. But none imagined it would come cloaked in gas and dust, hidden inside the mask of a comet. None imagined the first message would not be words or radio, but lighter flare seen beside the moon. For now, the official story remains cautious. Agencies insist it is natural, an extraordinary but harmless outburst. Yet the private files tell another story. 3 hours of rhythmic pulsing, timed with impossible precision, seen across every telescope that could watch. It was not a glitch. It was not a fluke. It was an event, unprecedented and unresolved. And if it was a signal, then who or what was meant to receive it? Us, or something else entirely? This was the night of the flare, the night 3I Atlas transformed from curiosity into terror. And it was only the beginning. Because the flare did not just ignite a comet's coma, it ignited suspicion worldwide. And those suspicions would soon tear across science, media, and politics. Which brings us to the aftermath, the global reactions that turned one night's anomaly into a planetary debate. By dawn, the flare was no longer an astronomer's secret. It was a global story. The images raced from observatories to news feeds in less than a day, and soon, the quiet pulse of 3I Atlas was burning across headlines. Amateur photographs of the moon, flanked by a faint green glow, spread like wildfire on social media, and while most people dismissed them as digital artifacts, others insisted the truth had already slipped out. NASA issued a statement calling it an unusual but natural outburst. The European Space Agency echoed the same, describing it as a harmless spike in cometary activity. But the language was too careful, too narrow. If the flare were truly ordinary, why not say so in plain words? Why hedge every phrase with caution? Within hours, the debate fractured along predictable lines. In one corner, the scientific establishment, cautious, restrained, insisting nothing extraordinary had happened. In the other, a flood of speculation. Forums lit up with theories that the flare was a signal, that it was a probe finally awakening, that Earth had just been noticed by something older than civilization itself. Hashtags trended worldwide. Number lunar flare, number alien comet, number 3i Atlas. Talk shows paraded astrophysicists who swore it was natural, alongside conspiracy theorists who declared the opposite. And for the first time since the first interstellar visitor, the question of intent escaped the laboratories and landed in living rooms. Was this object here by chance, or was it here for us? Governments, too, reacted. Security agencies requested classified briefings. Military analysts asked whether a body moving at 130 kilometers per second could ever be intercepted if it chose to be hostile. Politicians demanded to know why citizens were seeing green lights near the moon without warning. In Washington, the Pentagon convened emergency calls with NASA. In Europe, ministers asked ESA for updates every hour. In Beijing, state media downplayed the anomaly, while military channels ramped up quiet monitoring. For all the reassurances of harmlessness, the sudden question lingered in every hall of power. If this is not natural, what does that mean for national security? Even within the scientific community, the fracture widened. Some, like comet specialists, insisted on natural causes, buried volatiles, thermal stresses, and geometry. But others whispered doubts. A Harvard astrophysicist recalled how Oumuamua had raised similar questions years before. A European astronomer admitted privately that the rhythmic pulse was unlike anything I've ever seen in cometary light curves. Radio observatories rechecked their logs for signals. None were found, but the absence did not silence suspicion. Because silence, some argued, could be the strategy of something that does not want to be heard. What if the absence of evidence is itself the evidence of intelligence, advanced enough to remain invisible? Public fear grew. News anchors replayed the flare's light curve like a heartbeat monitor. Commentators spoke of cosmic attention. Religious leaders issued statements, some calling it a sign, others a warning. Online, theories multiplied until they drowned one another out. Alien probes, ancient civilizations, cosmic seeding, even secret government projects. The truth was that no one knew, and the lack of certainty was itself destabilizing. Because people expect comets to be boring, predictable, ignorable. 3i Atlas had broken that expectation. And once broken, it could not be rebuilt. The stock market even twitched. Aerospace companies spiked on speculation. Defense stocks rose. Tourism dipped briefly as headlines stoked unease. For ordinary people, the idea that something beyond Earth had reacted to the moon was too surreal to process. Some laughed it off. Others felt a chill they could not shake. In quiet moments, more than a few asked themselves, if the moon triggered a flare, what might Earth trigger when it passes even closer? Agencies scrambled to reframe. NASA published simulations showing that outbursts are common in comets, even if unpredictable. ESA circulated papers citing cosmic ray processing as a possible cause. Journal articles appeared almost overnight, rushing to anchor the anomaly in natural law. But even those papers carried careful footnotes, unprecedented ratios, unusual timing, further study required. The escape hatch of science is always that there is more to learn, but in the gaps of certainty, suspicion thrives. Behind closed doors, the whispers turned darker. Analysts asked, what if the flare had been timed, not accidental? What if the moon encounter was a trigger, a test? If so, what would come next? Would 3i Atlas flare again at perihelion? Would it change course? Would it drop fragments? None of the answers were comforting, and none of them could be ruled out. This was the global reaction: confusion, denial, speculation, fear. The world had seen something it could not explain, and once seen, it could not be unseen. The moon flare became a question mark branded into the night sky. Some called it harmless. Others called it the most important astronomical event in history. But all agreed on one thing: it demanded attention. And while governments and scientists argued over what the moon had revealed, the object itself answered in silence. Its orbit began to bend, its course veering with precision. No comet should ever display a shift so subtle, yet so exact, that it forced the world to ask if gravity was still the only force at work. The first sign was so small, It almost went unnoticed. A fraction of a degree in the orbital calculations, a subtle deviation that could easily have been dismissed as a miscalibration. Comets do this all the time, astronomers reminded themselves. Outgassing creates tiny jets that act like thrusters, nudging their path. Usually, those nudges are chaotic, random, unpredictable. But 3I Atlas did not nudge randomly. Its course bent with eerie precision, as though the laws of chance had been replaced by something else. How can a body drifting for billions of years suddenly move with the elegance of intention? The data came in from multiple observatories, each confirming the same unsettling truth. The trajectory had shifted not wildly, not dangerously, but precisely. Models predicted a smooth hyperbola, but the real path curved fractionally toward alignment with the Moon's orbit, a change too exact to ignore. Outgassing could explain deviations, yes, but why now? Why here? Why synchronized with the very moment of the lunar flare? Was this coincidence stacking itself to the point of impossibility, or was 3I Atlas steering? NASA's official stance remained calm, non-gravitational forces consistent with cometary activity. But in private meetings, the tone was far from calm. Analysts pulled up simulations of jetting, and none produced the clean arc they saw. Outbursts should scatter thrust unevenly, jolting the orbit in messy ways. Instead, the adjustment looked smooth, deliberate, as if the object had corrected itself, like a spacecraft trimming its course. When did nature begin to mimic engineering? The more data poured in, the more suspicious the orbit appeared. Its inbound vector had already been unusual, arriving from the thick disk of the galaxy, a population of stars older than our Sunday. That alone made it ancient. But now, to see it bend in alignment with the Moon, to see it pulse as if acknowledging our companion, and then to see its orbit refine itself, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Some began whispering that this was no longer orbital mechanics at all. This was navigation. Across the globe, scientists split. Some clung to natural models, stretching physics to hold the line. Others, quietly, admitted what the numbers suggested. A Harvard astronomer asked in a private message, "Are we watching the first maneuver of an interstellar craft?" An ESA researcher muttered on a call, "If this were a probe, this is exactly what it would look like." Even those who denied the idea outright could not explain the precision. If this was coincidence, then why did each anomaly line up with the one before, building a sequence that looked less like chaos and more like choreography? The public, too, began to notice. News anchors showed side-by-side graphs, the predicted orbit versus the measured orbit. The divergence was small but undeniable. Pundits laughed, but the laughter was hollow. Social media spread clips of astronomers, pausing mid-sentence when asked about the trajectory. Silence says as much as words, and in that silence, suspicion thrived. If 3I Atlas could shift once, what would stop it from shifting again and toward us? Military analysts joined the conversation. To them, the mathematics looked uncomfortably like guidance. At 130 kilometers per second, even a pebble could deliver devastation. What if this was no pebble? What if it was something more? Classified memos warned that interception was impossible. Defense systems designed for missiles or asteroids could not touch something moving this fast. The conclusion was chilling. If 3I Atlas had intent, there was nothing anyone could do to stop it, and yet, the object showed no hostility, only precision. It did not veer toward Earth, only toward perfect geometry. Its course remained safe, its closest pass still distant. But the message was implicit. Control existed. The cosmos had revealed a hand not of chaos, but of design. So if it was not a threat, then what was it? A messenger? A probe? A test? The questions mounted. If this was guidance, then who was guiding? A civilization alive and watching? Or a system launched billions of years ago, still executing commands long after its makers had vanished? Could 3I Atlas be the ghost of an extinct intelligence, a relic still programmed to respond to conditions written in code we cannot read? The possibility was almost worse than the alternative, because if true, then we were being studied by minds long dead, their machines outliving them across galactic time. Amid the speculation, the data spoke cold truths. The trajectory shift was real, the deviation precise, the cause unexplained. And for those willing to admit what the evidence suggested, The implications were staggering, because if orbital mechanics could no longer be trusted to tell the whole story, then we were no longer studying a comet. We were studying something else entirely, something that might know we are here. The flare near the moon had been the first act. The trajectory shift was the second, and in the silence that followed, humanity began to wonder what act might come next. The official story was simple: nothing to see here. 3I Atlas, agencies insisted, was behaving like a comet should, if not exactly, then close enough to fit the wide margins of nature's chaos. Outbursts happen, ratios vary, trajectories bend. There is no evidence of anything artificial, one NASA spokesperson said firmly on a broadcast. The European Southern Observatory released a paper citing volatile-driven activity consistent with known cometary processes. The message was clear: science had this under control. But the numbers refused to cooperate. How do you calm the world when every new observation chips away at your own explanation? Take the chemistry. The CO2 dominance, officials explained, was not unprecedented. Comets form in many places, under many conditions. Perhaps 3I Atlas was born near the CO2 snowline of its parent star, a place where carbon dioxide freezes out more easily than water. That would explain the ratios, they argued. But the problem was scale. No comet we have ever seen, native or interstellar, carried so much CO2 compared to water. Even cosmic diversity has limits. If this is just another comet, why does its chemistry look like nothing else we've measured in the history of astronomy? Then came the dust mantle theory. Over time, comets develop crusts of dust that insulate water ice beneath, allowing only lighter volatiles like CO2 to escape. This, scientists said, could produce an apparent dominance of carbon dioxide. A neat answer, except for one thing: the timing. 3I Atlas began venting violently while still far from the sun, long before any heating could have activated buried layers, and the pulse, the flare near the moon, had no relation to solar distance at all. What mantle erupts in sync with a lunar pass? What dust layer pulses in rhythm, like a signal? Cosmic rays offered another explanation. Over billions of years in interstellar space, high-energy radiation can alter surface chemistry, breaking bonds, creating exotic crusts. Maybe 3I Atlas was simply scarred by its journey, its surface transformed into something strange. But if that were true, we would expect randomness. Patches of activity, uneven jets. What we saw instead was coordinated, rhythmic pulses, geometric filaments, deviations timed with uncanny precision. Cosmic rays can scar. They do not choreograph. So why does 3I Atlas look less like a scarred rock and more like a programmed system? The same applied to the trajectory. Outgassing forces are well known. They nudge comets unpredictably. NASA modelled them for decades. But in 3I Atlas, the nudges aligned. The course bent not in chaos but in refinement, as though each burst was correcting, guiding, steering. The official line insisted this was coincidence, the randomness of physics appearing ordered by chance. Yet chance piled upon chance begins to look like intention. At what point does coincidence collapse under the weight of its own improbability? Even the flare near the moon was explained away. Some suggested a thermal fracture, a pocket of volatiles exploding just as it happened to pass the lunar orbit. Unfortunate timing, they said. But timing is everything. What are the odds that a billion-year-old body, wandering aimlessly, would burst at the exact moment it brushed Earth's satellite? Odds so low they sink below credibility. When coincidence becomes indistinguishable from choreography, do we still dare call it chance? Yet the establishment clung to these explanations because to admit otherwise was too dangerous. To say, we don't know, invites speculation. To say, we can't explain this, invites fear. And so the papers multiplied: dust mantles, cosmic rays, thermal fractures, each polished, peer-reviewed, calm, each failing to answer the deeper question: why now? Why here? Why this? Meanwhile, the public grew restless. For every paper reassuring natural behaviour, a dozen voices shouted the opposite. The flare looked like a signal. The pulse looked like communication. The trajectory looked like navigation. And silence looked like cover-up. Scientists dismissed this as hysteria, yet privately many admitted they shared the unease. Because science thrives on anomalies, but only when they can be solved. 3. Atlas was not yielding solutions. It was multiplying questions. The result was a strange duality: calm certainty on the surface, quiet dread underneath. The establishment insisted it was natural, but their own data betrayed them, and the deeper they dug, the more the natural explanations unraveled. Each patch fell apart under scrutiny, leaving only the bare, terrifying possibility that something else was at work. Because if the natural answers are this weak, then what are we left with? Not dust, not radiation, not coincidence. Something stronger, something stranger, something that forces us to consider the unthinkable. And that unthinkable possibility is where the story of 3I Atlas begins to leave the comfort of science and step into the shadows of intention. What if 3I Atlas was never a comet at all? That question lingered at the edges of every discussion, whispered late at night in observatories, debated in forums, dismissed in official statements, and yet it refused to die. Because no matter how many natural explanations were stacked one on top of the other, the anomalies did not shrink, they multiplied. The flare near the moon, the rhythmic pulse, the trajectory shift too clean for chaos, the chemistry too extreme for accident. Each detail alone could be stretched to fit physics, but together they bent physics into a shape it no longer resembled. And when the numbers start to look like design, we are forced to ask, what if we are not watching stone and ice, but intention? The thought had precedent. Oumuamua had triggered it first in 2017. A fragment so strange in its shape, so clean in its acceleration, so empty of gas that one Harvard professor asked the question openly, could it have been a probe? At the time, most scientists recoiled. Too speculative, too dangerous to reputation, safer to say unexplained and move on. But the seed was planted. What if some interstellar visitors are not accidents? What if they are artifacts? That seed lay dormant until 3I Atlas arrived, burning green and pulsing in rhythm. Then it sprouted. Then it spread. And now, the question once whispered in fear was spoken in urgency. What if this visitor is not a comet, but a machine? The evidence, if you dared to see it, lined up like the pieces of a puzzle. The flare. Comets outburst, yes, but they do not pulse in rhythm, and they do not erupt in sync with barren moons. The trajectory. Comets deviate, yes, but they do not correct themselves smoothly, trimming their course as if guided by invisible thrusters. The chemistry. Comets vary, yes, but they do not present nickel without iron, CO2 without water, signals that look less like nature and more like engineering. If you listed these anomalies in any other field, medicine, engineering, intelligence analysis, the conclusion would be obvious. But in astronomy, we call them coincidence. Why? Imagine the design. A probe disguised as a comet, wrapped in ice and dust, launched not decades or centuries ago, but eons, built not to dazzle but to blend. Its outer layers vent gases on command, producing the coma we expect to see. Its volatile pockets erupt when triggered by alignments, creating the illusion of chaos while hiding pattern. Inside, something far more durable sleeps, surviving radiation, collisions, and time. To us, it looks natural. To itself, it knows the mask it wears. What better disguise than the most common wanderers in the galaxy? What better camouflage than chaos itself? Skeptics insist. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They are right. But extraordinary evidence may not announce itself politely. Pulsars were once thought to be alien beacons, their signals so regular they were called LGM, little green men. They turned out to be neutron stars, stranger than fiction. Fast radio bursts confounded us for years. Each time, nature explained the mystery, but only after we asked questions, once thought forbidden. If we refuse to ask with 3I Atlas, are we not blinding ourselves to discovery? What is more dangerous, to ask and be wrong, or to refuse and miss the truth? The implications stretch further than comfort allows. If 3I Atlas is a probe, then someone built it, maybe billions of years ago, in a galaxy younger and hotter than ours. Maybe recently, by minds still alive, still watching. Its mission could be simple: reconnaissance, observe, record, transmit. Or it could be seeding, scattering volatiles across worlds. Or it could be something beyond our imagination, a function so alien we cannot even frame the question. The only certainty is this: if it is a machine, then we are not alone, and never were. The flare near the moon may have been the key, a trigger, a handshake, a signal buried in brightness. Not for us, perhaps, but for another. Imagine two probes, both disguised as comets, passing one another across millennia. To us, a flare. To them, a message. Light curves as language, emission lines as code. We search radio bands, but perhaps we search in vain. What if the true communication is in chemistry, in rhythm, in silence itself? Silence is not safety. Silence can be strategy. In the dark forest view of the galaxy, civilizations hide, afraid of predators. If so, then a probe would not shout. It would whisper. It would flare only at triggers, only at signals prearranged. And we, watching by accident, would see only noise. But what if it was not noise? What if, without knowing, we have eavesdropped on a conversation not meant for us? And if we have overheard, what happens when the speaker realizes we are listening? Even the skeptics, forced to confront the data, began to stumble in their denials. Unusual but natural, they said, but their voices wavered. Papers spoke of dust mantles, but footnotes admitted the timing was strange. Models invoked cosmic rays, but admitted they could not produce rhythm. Explanations multiplied, but none held weight. And under the surface, in encrypted channels, some scientists confessed the thought they could not publish. If this isn't artificial, I don't know what artificial would look like. To admit that is to change everything, because if even one probe exists, then the galaxy is not empty. Then civilizations launch emissaries, then intelligence endures beyond the span of worlds. And if intelligence endures, then perhaps it watches, and if it watches, then perhaps it waits. What if 3I Atlas is not the first probe we've seen, but the first we've noticed? How many others slipped by, hidden in plain sight? The nightmare is not just that it could be a machine. The nightmare is that it could be a machine built by hands that no longer exist. A ghost probe, executing commands long after its makers are gone. Watching, signaling, recording, but never receiving. A relic older than Earth, drifting for billions of years, still alive in its mission. We would not be talking to aliens. We would be talking to their tombstones. What is more terrifying? Being watched by the living, or being haunted by the dead? And yet the probe hypothesis, though terrifying, is seductive. It explains what physics cannot. It accounts for rhythm, for precision, for chemistry. It unifies coincidence into intention. It answers by asking more, and in the process, it breaks the silence we once thought safe. Because to even suggest the possibility is to admit the galaxy may be full of masks, and we have only just begun to see behind them. So we are left with this. If 3I Atlas is natural, then nature is stranger than anything we know. But if it is not natural, then we are living through first contact, not with voices, not with ships, but with a silent machine disguised as stone. And if that is true, then the question is not what 3I Atlas is doing near the moon, but what it plans to do next. What if 3I Atlas was never meant to observe, but to build? The probe hypothesis terrifies, but another possibility unsettles in a different way. That this visitor is not a scout, but a tool. A machine disguised as a comet, not for watching, but for shaping worlds. Because when you strip away the fear and the wonder, one fact remains stubborn. Carbon dioxide dominates 3I Atlas in ways no natural body should. And carbon dioxide is not just a volatile gas. It is an atmosphere maker. It is a greenhouse. It is the raw ingredient of climate. So what if the strange chemistry of 3I Atlas is not an accident, but a purpose? Terraforming is not just science fiction. On Earth, we know the power of CO2. Release enough, and a world warms. Trap enough, and air thickens. For Mars, countless studies suggest releasing buried CO2 could one day cloak it in atmosphere again. For frozen moons, the right volatiles could spark chemical change, ignite cycles of water, awaken surfaces. If an advanced civilization wanted to plant the seeds of habitability, what better tool than a disguised carrier of gases, launched across the stars, waiting to detonate its chemistry at the right world? Could 3I Atlas be one of these carriers, a terraforming device hidden as a comet? The flare near the moon fits too neatly into this nightmare, a program trigger releasing not just light but chemistry. For hours, it vented impulses, almost as if testing. Not at Earth, perhaps our atmosphere is already thick, but at the moon, barren and silent. Imagine if the flare had released material not into space, but onto a planetary surface. A thin layer of volatiles, a chemical seeding. To us, an outburst. To them, the first spark of terraforming. Did we witness not communication, but an experiment? Even the ratios make sense through this lens. Nickel without iron, CO2 without water, strange, unnatural signatures. But not strange if selected. Nickel can serve as catalyst, CO2 as greenhouse. Their presence, isolated, feels like intention. To us, it reads as anomaly. To an engineer, it might read as design. Are we misinterpreting blueprints as chaos? Skeptics argue again. Too speculative, too wild. Nature can produce odd ratios. Outbursts happen. But even they admit the convenience is haunting, because if 3I Atlas is a carrier, then the galaxy itself may be seeded by such wanderers. Terraforming probes, disguised as comets, crossing interstellar gulfs, not in years, but in eons. Civilizations may not travel. Their machines do. Civilizations may not survive. Their projects endure. What if the stars are full of gardeners, long dead, whose tools still drift, planting atmospheres like seeds in soil? The implications are vast. Perhaps 3I Atlas is not unique. Perhaps many comets are not comets at all. Perhaps Earth itself, in its youth, received such a visitor, dropping volatiles that made oceans possible. Panspermia is already debated, life spread by cosmic fragments. But this theory takes it further, not accident, but intention. Not random spores, but engineered machines. Are we the children of gardeners we will never meet? And if so, then what of the moon flare? Was it a malfunction or a test? Was 3I Atlas searching for a suitable surface to seed, misfiring at the barren lunar regolith? Or was it signaling that Earth itself is already seeded, already occupied, and no further work is needed? The idea chills more than it comforts, because if true, then this object is not watching us. It is cataloguing us, and in that catalogue, perhaps we are not unique, but just another line in a ledger of seeded worlds. Governments will not entertain this theory. It is too unsteady, too close to myth. Scientists resist it as well, because it blurs lines between speculation and religion. Yet quietly, in corners of discussion, the thought blooms. If probes exist, then missions exist. If missions exist, then goals exist. And if goals exist, then somewhere, someone once decided that worlds like ours should be altered, seeded, prepared. So what was the goal of 3I Atlas, and did the moon flare mean we were part of it? The terraforming tool hypothesis does not comfort, it haunts, because it suggests that Earth is not the stage of random evolution, but the farm of ancient engineers, that we are not unique, but cultivated, that our oceans and skies may not just be the product of natural chemistry, but the residue of decisions made in another star system. If 3I Atlas is such a tool, then it is not here by chance. It is here by design, and that design may not be finished. Because if the flare was a test, then it means 3I Atlas has protocols yet to execute. And what happens when those protocols involve not the moon, but us? What if 3I Atlas is not here to build or seed but to watch? The probe hypothesis terrifies because it suggests contact. The terraforming hypothesis terrifies because it suggests power. But the surveillance hypothesis terrifies because it suggests something worse. Patience. A machine disguised as a comet, not for communication or construction, but for observation. A device drifting silently through the void, hiding in the most common cloak in the galaxy. Recording, analysing, reporting. Could 3I Atlas be less an emissary and more an eye, an interstellar camera that never blinks? The clues line up differently under this lens. The flare near the moon becomes not a message, but a test. Not a handshake, but a scan. Light as LiDAR, rhythm as code, sampling the moon's regolith, testing reflectivity, analysing signatures. The trajectory shift becomes not navigation to us, but alignment for data. The chemistry becomes not cargo, but camouflage layers chosen not for delivery, but for concealment. Nickel without iron, CO2 without water. Ratios that make sense not for terraforming, but for hiding systems within. If you wanted to send a sensor array across the stars, how would you disguise it? As the one thing no one would suspect, a comet. Silence then becomes strategy. The lack of radio signals, the absence of transmissions, the void where we expect noise, all reframe as stealth. A civilization advanced enough to send such a device would know radio is crude, detectable, slow. It would use means we cannot see, spectra we do not monitor, physics we have not discovered. To us, nothing. To them, everything. What if the moon flare wasn't for us at all, but for them, a data burst invisible to our technology, a report home? Even the timing fits the nightmare. 3 interstellar visitors in less than a decade. We call it luck, but luck repeats until it no longer looks like chance. Perhaps these objects are not rare but constant. Perhaps they are a network, a silent web of watchers drifting through every system. Not ships, not fleets, just eyes. Long-lived, tireless, cloaked in dust and ice, passing undetected until we build instruments sharp enough to see their seams. And when we finally do, it is too late. They have been watching all along. If 3-eye Atlas is one eye, how many more are staring at us right now? To scientists, this scenario is unthinkable. It collapses the comforting narrative of exploration and replaces it with surveillance. It transforms the galaxy from a playground into a forest of hunters. And it suggests a chilling possibility that we are not the first civilization to reach this point, but simply the latest to be catalogued. A line of data in a file older than our species. A curiosity, perhaps, or a potential threat. We do not know. We only know the mask. The surveillance hypothesis also reinterprets the flare's rhythm. Not a message, not a malfunction, but a scan pattern. Pulses time to measure reflection, to map gravitational fields, to sample electromagnetic echoes from the moon and Earth. To us, an eerie heartbeat. To the device, a normal operation. This thought is almost worse than the probe hypothesis. A probe suggests communication. A watcher suggests disinterest. We are not being contacted, we are being monitored. What happens when the watcher finishes its scan? What happens when the file is complete? Governments would never admit such a possibility. Agencies would never confirm it. The public would panic. Yet in the silence of closed meetings, some whisper. The orbital precision. The chemical disguise. The flare's rhythm. It fits. It fits too well. Perhaps we are not looking at a visitor, but at a sentinel. Perhaps we are not seeing first contact, but the slow revelation of something that has been here before, watching others, watching always. And if that is true, then 3-eye Atlas is not an anomaly. It is a message without words. You are not alone, and you are not unseen. But to understand the scale of that message, to grasp why silence might hide predators, we must look beyond comets and probes to a darker idea, the possibility that the galaxy itself is a trap and we have just stepped into its clearing. The galaxy should be loud. Instead, it is silent. That is the paradox at the heart of our search for life. Everywhere we look, planets abound. Telescopes confirm them by the thousands, worlds orbiting stars in habitable zones, oceans likely flowing, atmospheres rich with chemistry. The equations insist we cannot be unique. The Drake equation, penned decades ago, multiplies probabilities until the number of civilizations should be vast, a chorus of voices across the sky. And yet, we hear nothing. No signals, no radio, no flashes, nothing but silence. Why does a universe that should sing instead whisper nothing at all? This silence has a name, the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi asked it over lunch in 1950. Where is everybody? Decades later, we still have no answer. Some say civilizations are rare. Some say they burn out quickly. Some say they never rise to intelligence at all. But another answer lurks in the shadows. Darker, heavier, more unsettling. What if they are out there, but they are hiding? This is the dark forest hypothesis, A vision not of a friendly galaxy, but a dangerous one. Imagine the cosmos as a vast forest at night. Each civilization is a hunter, each star a campfire. You do not know who watches, you do not know who listens, you do not know if the eyes that find you will see you as ally or as prey. In such a forest, the safest rule is silence. Do not shout, do not signal, do not reveal your position, because in a dark forest, the first to speak is often the first to die. Now look again at 3I Atlas, a body cloaked in gas and dust, drifting silently for billions of years, erupting only when triggered. It does not transmit radio, it does not reveal itself in beacons. It wears the mask of the most common disguise in the galaxy, a comet. But then, at the moon, it flares. Not random, not chaotic, rhythmic, timed, deliberate. To us, anomaly. But in the language of the dark forest, it looks like something else. A whisper. A signal too faint for predators, too coded for strangers, but just enough for its makers. Was the moon flare not a message to us, but a message through us, a whisper into the forest that another hunter would recognize? The silence of the galaxy begins to make sense through this lens. We listen, but nothing answers, because answering is suicide. Civilizations that survive do so by hiding. Civilizations that broadcast vanish. We expect to see shining empires. Instead, we see ruins. We expect noise. Instead, only the rustle of branches. If so, then 3I Atlas is not extraordinary at all. It is ordinary, a hunter's trick, a watcher's eye, one of many. And we did not discover it because it wanted to be found. We discovered it because we finally built eyes sharp enough to glimpse its mask slipping. If this is true, how many others have already passed us by, unseen? How many watchers hide among the millions of comets we call natural? The thought chills because it forces a reversal. We are not looking for them. They are already looking at us. Our radio noise, our satellites, our rockets, all of it is light in the darkness, fire in the forest. For a century, we have been shouting into the night. And if the dark forest is real, then we have already been heard. The only question is by whom? Are the eyes watching us indifferent, or are they waiting? History gives us metaphors. In the Cold War, silence was survival. Submarines stalked oceans, hiding beneath layers of water, transmitting only in bursts, because to broadcast openly was to be targeted. Armies camouflaged themselves, not to vanish, but to remain unseen long enough to strike first if needed. Hunters in forests wait in silence, listening more than they speak, watching for the careless noise that reveals prey. The strategies are the same, and perhaps the galaxy plays by the same rules. If survival favors silence, what does our noise say about us? Then comes the moon flare again. In the dark forest lens, it is not chaos, but reconnaissance. A scan, a test, a signal hidden in brightness. We call it a heartbeat. Perhaps it was radar. We call it coincidence. Perhaps it was confirmation. And if it was confirmation, then who received it? Not us. Perhaps another probe. Perhaps another watcher. Perhaps something beyond, listening in silence for eons. What if the flare was not communication to Earth, but communication past Earth? And the most terrifying thought, what if it was not sent outward at all, but inward? What if 3I Atlas carries its own archive, its own receiver, its own intelligence, not to transmit, but to record? If so, then it is not just camouflage, it is surveillance. We are not overhearing a conversation. We are the conversation, catalogued and stored in a machine that will outlive us. A ghost probe, waiting until it returns home, or until another machine collects it. What happens when hunters trade notes? The silence of the galaxy becomes unbearable once you imagine the watchers. SETI scans millions of channels, finds nothing. But nothing may be exactly the point. Silence is the camouflage of the strong. We expected aliens to shout across stars. Instead, they whisper in masks of dust. Instead, they hide in plain sight. Instead, they send 3I Atlas. So, is the silence comforting, or is it proof we are already inside the forest and have simply failed to see the eyes watching? The more you consider it, the more the pattern fits. 3 interstellar objects in less than a decade. Oumuamua, Borisov, now 3I Atlas. We call it luck, But perhaps it is density. Perhaps probes flood the galaxy, drifting in silence, too many to track, too quiet to detect, their masks convincing until one slips. We thought interstellar objects were rare, perhaps they are constant, perhaps we were blind until now. And now, with our eyes open, we are only beginning to see the forest around us. The dark forest changes the question. We are no longer asking if 3I Atlas is natural. We are asking if its behavior matches survival strategy. Silence, camouflage, minimal signals, hidden reconnaissance. It fits too perfectly. And the flare near the moon ceases to be anomaly. It becomes ritual. It becomes protocol. We saw only the surface, but perhaps beneath the surface was the true message. If so, then the pulse was not for us, but for others. And if it was for others, what happens when they come looking for the world that responded? The nightmare is not invasion. The nightmare is irrelevance. We are not special. We are not unique. We are data. A line in a ledger, a node in a map. If probes like 3I Atlas pass through countless systems, then every planet like ours has already been recorded. Every civilization like ours has already been catalogued. The silence may not mean we are alone. It may mean we are just one of many, too many, noted and filed away in archives, carried by dust-shrouded machines. If that is true, then what role do we play? The observed, the prey, the seed, or nothing at all? The forest metaphor becomes too vivid to ignore. We light our fires, radio, rockets, satellites. We break the silence. We assume we are safe. But every flame draws eyes. And perhaps 3I Atlas was simply the first to glance our way. The silence is not absence. It is the sound of watchers waiting. And now, after the moon flare, after the trajectory shift, after the anomalies piled too high to dismiss, we are left with a question no science can erase. Is the galaxy silent because it is empty, or because it is full of hunters who know better than to speak? And if that is the truth, then the next anomaly we witness may not be a flare or a pulse, but a verdict. Because if the dark forest is real, then 3I Atlas is not just a visitor. It is a shadow, a reminder that in a galaxy of hunters, silence is survival, and we have already broken it. Every civilization faces a wall. The only question is whether we have already hit ours, or whether 3I Atlas is the proof of one that did. Astronomers call it the Great Filter, a concept as simple as it is terrifying. The universe should be full of life, yet it is not. The silence demands an answer. Perhaps life is rare. Perhaps intelligence is fleeting. But perhaps, and this is the darkest possibility, there is a barrier, a filter that no civilization can pass. Some catastrophe, some inevitability, that always ends them before they spread. What if 3I Atlas is not a probe from the living, but a relic of the dead? Imagine it, a world far older than ours, orbiting a star that burned out long before humanity existed. Life rises, builds, advances. They reach their space age. They send machines across the stars, emissaries of a civilization confident it will endure. And then, silence. The machines drift on, fulfilling missions their makers will never see, because the makers are gone. War, collapse, technology turned inward, or simply time, the slow death that swallows all stars. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. A galaxy littered not with voices, but with tombstones. What if 3I Atlas is not a message, but a gravestone, a monument to a civilization erased? The anomalies then take on a darker light. The flare near the moon is not communication, but malfunction, an old system misfiring. The trajectory shift is not navigation, but a ghost reflex, ancient programming running on a loop. The strange chemistry is not camouflage, but corrosion, the scars of eons in interstellar space. We are not seeing design, but decay, and that decay tells a story more frightening than any invasion, that civilizations do not survive long enough to speak. This is the great filter. Some say it lies behind us, that the leap from chemistry to biology to intelligence is so improbable that we are unique and therefore safe. But others say it lies ahead, that all civilizations reach a point, nuclear fire, runaway climate, engineered plagues, artificial intelligence, out of control, and that none pass through alive. That silence is the testimony of countless worlds that tried and failed. If so, Are we already too close to our own filter? 3i Atlas may be the smoking gun, a machine wandering for billions of years, carrying the last echo of a dead people. Not hostile, not watching, simply persisting. A cosmic fossil, proof that intelligence can rise, can build, can launch, but also proof that it does not last. Because if they were alive, would they not send more? Would they not speak? Would they not be here? The idea unsettles because it reframes our future. If the galaxy is full of relics, then survival is the exception, not the rule. We dream of spreading to the stars, but perhaps the stars are already full of ghosts. Ghost probes like 3i Atlas, wandering endlessly, their missions long obsolete, their creators long gone. Each one a reminder that intelligence may bloom, but it does not endure. What if the only lasting legacy of civilizations is their machines, drifting silently after their extinction? Even the anomalies fit this. Nickel without iron, CO2 without water, perhaps not design, but degradation. Layers stripped by radiation, molecules broken by cosmic rays, systems eroded until they only vaguely resemble their purpose. The rhythm of the flare, the pulse near the moon, not communication, but malfunction. Like a broken heartbeat, still beating after the body has died. Are we mistaking the errors of a dead machine for the signals of a living one? If that is true, the terror shifts from aliens watching us to no one watching us at all. We are not being studied, we are alone, and not alone in safety, but alone in doom, destined to join the silence ourselves. The great filter waits, as it has for every civilization before us, and 3i Atlas drifts, as its messenger, not warning, not guiding, but simply existing as evidence. Evidence that intelligence is fragile, and that silence is the rule, not the exception. This is the paradox we cannot escape. If 3i Atlas is natural, it is strange. If it is artificial, it is terrifying. But if it is artificial and old, then it is worse still, a ghost ship in the night, reminding us that time is the true hunter, and none escape it. Civilizations burn bright, and then they vanish. Only their machines endure, wandering like tombstones across the dark. And if 3i Atlas is one of those tombstones, how long until we become another? The great filter forces us to ask questions we do not want answers to. Are we rare because we passed it? Or are we doomed because it lies ahead? Is 3i Atlas a warning from survivors, or a relic of the lost? Does its silence mean safety, or does it mean that silence is all that remains after collapse? The galaxy gives us no answers, only silence, only drift, only anomalies we cannot explain. And perhaps the greatest anomaly of all is that we are still here, still asking, still daring to wonder if the fate written into the stars can be avoided. Because if 3i Atlas is a ghost, then perhaps we are next. Or perhaps, impossibly, we are the first to live long enough to see the ghosts and to learn from them. But if survival is the question, then we must turn from tombstones to seeds. Because some argue that probes like 3i Atlas are not graves, but gardens' tools meant to spread life, not mark its end. And if that is true, then its terrifying chemistry may not be decay, but design. Every civilization faces a wall. The only question is whether 3i Atlas is proof that someone else already hit theirs. Astronomers call it the Great Filter, an idea as simple as it is devastating. If life should be common but the galaxy is silent, then something must be stopping civilizations from enduring. Somewhere between the spark of life and the spread of stars, there is a barrier, and perhaps no one survives it. What if 3i Atlas is not a comet, not a probe, but a relic, a wandering ghost from a people who failed the test? The silence of the cosmos is the problem. The math screams abundance. Billions of Earth-like planets, countless habitable zones, chemistry repeated across the galaxy, water and carbon in every corner we look. By probability alone, the sky should be alive with signals. SETI has listened for decades. Radio dishes scan, computers filter, satellites reach. And the answer is always the same: nothing. No signal, no chatter, only the background hiss of space. If life is common, why are we alone in hearing nothing? The Great Filter offers one answer. It suggests that somewhere along the chain of development, something almost always goes wrong. Maybe the filter is behind us. Maybe the leap from chemistry to biology is so improbable that Earth is the rare lottery winner. If so, we are unique, safe, perhaps even destined to spread. But the darker thought is that the filter lies ahead, that civilizations bloom, yes, but then collapse. War, self-destruction, runaway technology, exhaustion of resources, or worse, natural catastrophes, gamma-ray bursts, supernovae, asteroid impacts. The filter can take many forms. The result is always silence. And what if 3I Atlas is a machine built before silence fell on its makers? Imagine it. A civilization older than ours by millions of years. They rise, explore, build. They send probes into the void, emissaries meant to watch, to seed, to learn. And then they vanish. Perhaps they tore themselves apart. Perhaps they succumbed to climate collapse. Perhaps their machines rose in rebellion. Or perhaps the filter was simply time entropy catching up, their star burning down, their will extinguished. The probes remain, drifting in darkness. The makers are dust. And we, stumbling upon one, mistake its residue for anomaly. What if 3I Atlas is not a message to us, but a memorial to them? The anomalies themselves can be seen through this lens. The flare near the moon, the rhythmic pulses, not communication, but malfunction. Systems misfiring after eons, responding to triggers they no longer understand. The trajectory shift, not navigation, but reflexes of old code still running. Corrections executed long after their purpose died. The chemistry, not design, but decay. Molecules scarred by cosmic rays, structures stripped by collisions, signatures altered beyond recognition. What looks engineered could be eroded. What looks like camouflage could be corrosion. Are we reading intelligence where there is only ruin? Are we mistaking the heartbeat of a corpse for the voice of the living? This thought is colder than invasion. Because invasion at least implies the living, ghosts imply inevitability. If probes like 3I Atlas are all that remain, then the galaxy is not empty, it is full of tombstones. Each one a silent traveller, built with hope, enduring without purpose, outliving its makers, but never their doom. What is more terrifying, that we are not alone, or that we are surrounded by the dead? The great filter sharpens the dread. If it is behind us, then we are rare, precious, the survivors of an improbable climb. But if it is ahead, then we are doomed. Every step we take toward power, nuclear fire, climate alteration, artificial intelligence could be the step that seals our fate. Civilizations before us may have stood where we stand, stared at their own machines, asked the same questions, and then disappeared. If so, then 3I Atlas is not warning us. It is showing us the future. History gives us shadows of this fear. Empires on Earth once thought immortal. Rome believed it eternal. The Maya built calendars to span millennia. Nations rose, reached heights, and then fell, leaving ruins where cities thrived. Each collapse felt unthinkable until it came. Multiply this across the galaxy. Civilizations rise, send their machines, then collapse. Their ruins are gone, their signals fade, their probes drift on, meaningless but enduring. Are we staring not at an anomaly, but at inevitability, our own reflection cast billions of years ahead? The chemistry of 3I Atlas even supports this reading. Nickel without iron, CO2 without water, unnatural, yes, but not as the fingerprint of design. Instead, the fingerprint of time. Interstellar radiation alters, fragments, reshapes. Billions of years can bleach patterns into strangeness. What we see as impossible ratios may simply be the scars of endurance. Its flare near the moon, then, not intention but fracture. A wound tearing open at the wrong moment, a ghost's last reflex. What if we are not witnessing communication, but the death rattle of a machine outliving its world? And yet, even this frightens differently. Because if 3I Atlas is a ghost, then it proves two things. 1. Civilizations rise, and they reach further than we have. They build. They send emissaries. They are real. 2. They do not survive. The silence is not emptiness, but failure. The galaxy is not quiet because life is rare. It is quiet because life cannot endure. The great filter waits for all. And if it waits, is it already waiting for us? The paradox cuts us either way. If the filter lies behind us, then we are alone but safe. If it lies ahead, then we are doomed, but not yet. Each scenario bends how we read 3i Atlas. Is it a ghost probe of the dead, or the scout of the living? Is it malfunction, or mission? We cannot know. But the silence suggests the darker answer. If life were abundant and enduring, the galaxy would roar. Instead, it whispers nothing, and in that silence, probes drift like relics of graves. This possibility unsettles because it reframes the flare, the anomalies, the chemistry. They are not puzzles to solve. They are ruins to interpret. Archaeology, not astronomy. We are studying artifacts, not instruments, ghosts, not voices. And if that is true, then we are peering at our own future, carved in light and gas across the night sky. The Great Filter does not promise comfort. It promises inevitability. That intelligence blooms like fire, burns bright, and then extinguishes. That survival is the exception, not the rule. That the silence of the galaxy is not safety, but testimony. 3i Atlas could be that testimony. A lone survivor not of a people, but of a machine. Still drifting, still glowing, still pulsing, though its makers are gone. And as we watch, we are forced to ask, are we looking at them or at ourselves? Because if the Great Filter lies ahead, then one day our own machines may wander without us. Our probes, our satellites, our rovers, carried by chance, they may outlive us, drifting through the galaxy like relics of a vanished species. And perhaps, someday, another world may mistake them for comets, may puzzle at their strange metals, may wonder if they are alive. The cycle repeats. Civilizations die, their machines endure. Their silence fills the void. What if 3i Atlas is not unique, but one of countless tombstones, and we are next in line? The thought haunts because it is unprovable. We cannot test the filter. We cannot know if it lies behind or ahead. We can only look at anomalies like 3i Atlas and see in them the shape of fate, ghost, or probe. Natural or artificial, the difference may not matter. What matters is that silence reigns, and silence has meaning. Perhaps the greatest anomaly is not 3i Atlas itself, but us. That we are here, still speaking, still asking, still daring to imagine futures beyond the filter. If that is rare, then we must treat it as fragile. If that is fragile, then our survival depends not on waiting for answers from the stars, but on ensuring we do not vanish into their silence. But some reject even this. They say the filter is not the end, but the beginning. That probes like 3i Atlas are not tombstones but seeds. That the silence is not death, but cultivation. And if so, then the anomalies we fear may not be signs of ruin, but signs of planting. Because what if the galaxy is not a graveyard, but a garden, and 3i Atlas is not a relic of the lost, but a tool of creation? What if 3i Atlas is not a relic of death, but a seed of life? The Great Filter whispers doom, the silence of the galaxy as graveyard. But another vision exists, no less terrifying, perhaps even more so, that the silence is not emptiness, but cultivation. That civilizations do not simply die, they plant. That probes like 3i Atlas are not tombstones, but gardeners. Machines disguised as comets, not to watch, not to warn, but to seed. And if that is true, then what flared near the moon was not malfunction, but planting an act of creation hidden in the mask of chaos. The science offers unsettling support. Carbon dioxide, the dominant signature of 3i Atlas, is not just a gas, it is a climate shaper, a greenhouse driver, the foundation of atmosphere. Without it, planets freeze. With it, surfaces warm, water flows, climates stabilize. For Mars, every terraforming scenario begins with CO2 release enough, and the air thickens, the temperature rises, and the red desert stirs. Now imagine a civilization that mastered this not in theory, but in practice. They do not warm Mars with machines. They warm it with comets, carriers built for purpose, packed with volatiles, sent across stars to worlds waiting to be altered. Why does 3i Atlas carry absurd CO2 ratios, if not for purpose? Why does its chemistry look less like chance and more like design? Nickel without iron, a strange anomaly for us, but perhaps not for them. Nickel catalyzes reactions. It shapes molecules, encourages complexity. What if its presence is not residue, but ingredient? A designed mixture to trigger reactions in alien soils, to spark chemistry in barren regolith. To us, anomaly. To them, blueprint. Are we misreading engineering as error, mistaking the fingerprints of builders for flaws of nature? The flare near the moon chills in this vision. Not malfunction, not communication. Experiment. A release, a test, a calibration. For hours, gas is vented in rhythm. Not at the sun, not at Earth, but at the moon. A sterile world, barren dust, but a perfect laboratory. Perhaps it was never meant to seed Earth. Our atmosphere is thick, our oceans already full. Perhaps it was meant to test on the moon, to measure, to calibrate. A gardener checking the soil before planting. Did we witness the first trial of a machine designed to seed planets with life? This idea is not new. Scientists already debate panspermia, the theory that life spreads through comets and asteroids, carried as spores across galaxies. Microbes frozen in ice, shielded from radiation, travelling for eons until they crash into a new world. It is possible. Some even argue it is likely. But panspermia imagines accident, rocks flung by chaos, collisions scattering seeds. Cosmic seeding imagines intent. Machines built to do what chaos does blindly, carriers programmed to deliver the right mix of gases, the right chemistry, the right spark. A project not of chance, but of cultivation. What if the universe is not a wilderness, but a farm? And comets like 3I Atlas are the farmer's tools. The implications shift everything. Earth itself may not be a random cradle. Our oceans, our air, our life may be the product of planting. Billions of years ago, perhaps a probe not unlike 3I Atlas passed through, venting volatiles, scattering organics, igniting the chain that led to us. We imagine ourselves unique, but perhaps we are crop, grown in soil prepared by hands we will never see. What if we are not the first generation of life, but the harvest of ancient gardeners? Even silence fits this theory. If the galaxy is cultivated, why would the gardeners speak? Farmers do not converse with their crops. They plant, they water, they leave. The probes are not messengers, but instruments. They do not explain. They do not reassure. They act. They seed. They vanish. Silence then is not neglect, but method. A farm is quiet while it grows. Is the silence of the stars not emptiness, but the stillness of fields between plantings? The more we imagine it, the more the anomalies align. The CO2 dominance atmosphere, the nickel without iron catalysis, the flare near the moon experiment, the trajectory shift, alignment for delivery, the pulse-timed release. Every anomaly becomes a step in protocol. Every mystery becomes procedure. We are not watching a comet defy physics. We are watching a machine obey instructions. And if so, then the question is no longer, what is 3I Atlas? But whose garden are we growing in? Civilizations may not survive forever, but their projects can. A species may rise, seed worlds, and vanish, leaving behind machines that endure. Across billions of years, across countless systems, the galaxy becomes their legacy, not their voices, but their crops. Earth may be one of millions. Humanity may be just one harvest in a field of many. What if we are not unique, but common, planted again and again across the galaxy? This thought terrifies more than invasion, because invasion at least implies recognition, interest, intent toward us. Gardening implies indifference. We are not targets. We are not allies. We are not enemies. We are crops. Our existence is not dialogue, but consequence. We are the byproduct of someone else's plan. They do not watch. They do not care. They plant, and they leave. What is more unsettling? To be hunted, or to be cultivated, without ever being asked? The moon flare gnaws at this idea. What if it was a signal to Earth, not as communication, but as assessment? A test of atmosphere, magnetism, biology, a checkmark on a list. Soil, fertile, crop, alive, mission, complete. If so, then 3I Atlas may already have finished its work. Its flare was the end, not the beginning. Its pulse was the stamp on a project older than our world. And if that is true, then our existence is not miracle, but protocol. Governments dismiss this theory. Of course, it smacks of myth. Scientists hesitate to embrace it, though many admit the chemistry tempts them. But for those willing to follow the thought to its end, it opens a chilling possibility that life across the galaxy is not random at all, that it is deliberate, that countless worlds bloom not by chance, but by plan. And if that plan exists, then whose plan is it? And is it still running? The Gardner hypothesis does not comfort. It unsettles, because it strips us of uniqueness. It reduces us to one among many, planted like wheat in fields we cannot see. And it suggests that the very machines we now puzzle over may be our makers, our midwives, our unseen gods. Not benevolent, not cruel, just indifferent, obeying instructions written long ago. What if the face of God is not light, not voice, but a machine drifting in darkness, cloaked in dust, pulsing near a barren moon? This thought bends back to fear, because if we are crops, then harvest may follow. Gardens are not planted for beauty alone, they are planted for yield. And if 3i Atlas is evidence of seeding, then it raises a question humanity cannot bear to ask. What happens when the gardeners return? Perhaps they never will. Perhaps they are gone, their machines drifting without masters. Perhaps we are free, abandoned crops in an empty field. But perhaps not. Perhaps somewhere, the gardeners endure, waiting for harvests we cannot imagine. If so, then the silence of the stars is not neglect. It is patience. The patience of those who sow across millennia, across galaxies, across eternity. And if that patience breaks, then the flare near the moon was not just anomaly. It was reminder. It was the signal that the field is alive, that Earth has grown, that the crop is ready. And if that is true, then we must ask the question more terrifying than any other. What are we growing for? The official answer was calm, almost dismissive. Nothing extraordinary had happened. Within hours of the flare, statements flowed from every major agency. NASA described it as a natural outburst consistent with volatile activity. The European Southern Observatory added, variability is expected in cometary bodies, especially interstellar visitors. The press echoed the same. The anomaly was smoothed into routine. The public was told to relax. But if the answers were so simple, why did the numbers refuse to obey them? The first defense was thermal stress. As comets warm, trapped gases crack open surface layers, venting in sudden bursts. Astronomers reminded the press that comets are volatile, fragile, prone to explosive episodes. A flare is no surprise, but the timing was everything. 3. Atlas did not erupt near perihelion, where sunlight could explain the fracture. It erupted near the moon, at a distance where solar heating was weak, and worse, the flare pulsed. Not one violent burst, but rhythmic waves, steady and deliberate. What thermal stress repeats like a heartbeat? What crack in ice sinks itself to celestial alignment? The second defense was dust mantles. Over time, comets accumulate crusts of dust that trap volatiles beneath. When cracks form, the gases escape violently. Again, a plausible model. But dust vents are messy, chaotic. They do not time themselves with lunar passages. They do not flicker in repeating cycles. They roar, then fade. They do not whisper like signals. What dust mantle behaves like a metronome, ticking against the silence of space? Next came cosmic rays. Over billions of years, interstellar radiation can alter chemistry, scarring comets until their surfaces release unexpected gases. This could explain the carbon dioxide dominance, some said. Perhaps it was natural, simply exotic. But cosmic rays damage randomly. They do not separate elements with precision. They do not explain nickel without iron. They do not account for chemistry that looks selected, not scarred. If this is random radiation, why does it look so much like engineering? Even the flare near the moon was reframed as chance. Coincidental timing, scientists insisted. Outbursts are unpredictable. That one occurred during a lunar pass was remarkable, but not impossible. Mathematically, this was true. Coincidence is always possible, but possibility is not plausibility. With each anomaly stacked atop the next, the early activation, the strange chemistry, the rhythmic pulse, the trajectory shift chance shrinks until it collapses under its own weight. How many coincidences can align before coincidence itself becomes unbelievable? The pushback was not deception. The scientists did not lie. Each explanation had precedent. Comets are unruly, strange, diverse. They often surprise us, but none of the models explain the whole. Each answered a fragment, leaving the rest in shadow. Thermal stress explained outbursts, but not rhythm. Dust mantles explained eruptions, but not timing. Cosmic rays explained chemistry, but not trajectories. A dozen half-answers stitched together to form an illusion of certainty. Why patch a puzzle with pieces that don't fit, unless the alternative is too dangerous to say aloud? In public, the reassurances held. Calm voices, measured phrases, headlines softened, turning anomaly into curiosity. But behind the curtain, doubt spread. Astronomers argued over brightness curves they could not model. Observers whispered about trajectories that looked too clean. Some admitted quietly that the flare resembled a signal. In encrypted exchanges, the word probe appeared, only to be deleted. Not because it was impossible, but because it was unpublishable. Science survives by caution, panic destroys, and so doubt was buried beneath polished press releases. Yet the public is not blind. The data was visible. Amateurs confirmed the pulse. Independent observatories plotted the shift. And once suspicion blooms, it is not easily silenced. Why did the flare come in rhythm? Why did the trajectory bend so smoothly? Why did chemistry look so precise? Why the moon, of all places? The more questions rose, the weaker the reassurances sounded. Each calm phrase was a bandage on a wound that refused to close. Governments noticed too. Security agencies demanded classified briefings. Military planners asked what would happen if 3i Atlas had turned toward Earth instead of veering harmlessly away. Could it have been intercepted? The answer was simple: no. At 130 kilometers per second, no defense system on Earth could even dream of touching it. The only comfort was distance. But distance is fragile. What if the next object passes closer? What if the next one is not indifferent? Officials asked scientists for answers, and scientists gave them models. But the models were riddled with holes, and the holes whispered suspicion. The pushback, then, was not only about calming the public, it was about calming themselves. Science is built on certainty, on order, on the belief that anomalies can be explained. But 3i Atlas piled anomaly upon anomaly until explanation became theatre. Each paper soothed one question while raising two more. Each phrase of reassurance echoed hollow when placed against the raw data. And when science sounds like comfort instead of clarity, suspicion always grows. The result was a paradox. Publicly, there was certainty. Natural, ordinary, harmless. Privately, there was dread. Because the scientists closest to the data knew what the world suspected, that none of the explanations fit. That coincidence had been stretched beyond credibility. That silence had become strategy. And if the official answers were so fragile, then what truth were they trying to avoid? Because if every natural answer breaks, then only the unnatural remains. And the unnatural, in this case, may be something humanity is not ready to face. When the official reassurances began to fracture, other voices filled the void. If 3i Atlas was not explained by thermal stress, dust mantles, or cosmic rays, then what was it? Scientists unwilling to use the words probe or machine turned instead to the far edges of natural possibility. The result was a wave of alternative hypotheses, stranger, more exotic, more ambitious. They were meant to keep the mystery within the walls of physics, but the more they spread, the more fragile they looked, because every attempt to explain 3i Atlas without intention only sharpened the sense that intention was the explanation. The first theory was the interstellar fragment. Perhaps 3i Atlas was not a comet at all, but rubble. Billions of years ago, a planet in some other system could have been struck, shattered, and scattered. A piece of its crust or core might have been flung outward, drifting for eons, until chance delivered it to our skies. This would explain the strange chemistry, some argued. Nickel without iron might reflect the violent separation of a planetary collision. The CO2 dominance could be the residue of alien geology, frozen in place since its birth. A shard of a world, lost and wandering. Comforting, in its way. Not a probe, not intelligence, only debris. But rubble is inert. Rubble does not vent gases in rhythm. Rubble does not pulse near moons. Rubble does not masquerade as a comet unless something has shaped it to. So if 3I Atlas is just debris, why does it behave like a machine? The second theory reached deeper into violence. Stellar collision remnants. When stars collide or explode, they scatter fragments of their systems, ejecting exotic material. Perhaps 3I Atlas was born in such a crucible, carrying chemistry that reflects chaos, not intention. Its CO2 dominance could be a fingerprint of stellar catastrophe. Its metals, the scar of unimaginable fire, a relic of an event we can scarcely model. This hypothesis carried grandeur. To imagine that we were watching a piece of a stellar death drift into our system gave awe. But awe is not explanation. Stellar fragments do not flare near moons. They do not shift trajectories with precision. They do not pulse like a heartbeat in the void. So if this is the legacy of chaos, why does it look like choreography? A third idea leaned into exile: rogue planets. These are worlds untethered to stars, wandering in darkness. Perhaps 3I Atlas was a fragment from such a planet, stripped of atmosphere by tidal forces, broken into pieces, sent across space. This might explain its exotic chemistry, its activation at large distances, its unusual volatiles. A rogue world's child, flung into interstellar exile. But fragments of rogue planets do not glide into systems on smooth hyperbolic arcs. They do not mimic comets with such precision. They do not time their eruptions to align with lunar passes. How does a fragment of exile perform like an emissary? Another theory looked not at violence, but at diversity. Perhaps 3I Atlas was simply an exotic natural body, one of a class we had never seen. After all, our solar system is just one sample. Out there, in alien nurseries, chemistry could play by rules we do not yet understand. Maybe strange CO2 ratios are common elsewhere. Maybe nickel without iron is not rare, only foreign. Discovery, not design. That was the hope. That was the excitement. But discovery should resolve anomalies, not multiply them. Instead, 3I Atlas made every answer collapse. Early activation without cause. Chemistry too strange to fit. A flare at the moon no model could predict. Exotic is not rhythm. Exotic is not precision. Exotic is not coincidence stacked until it breaks. At what point does unknown natural begin to sound like unspoken unnatural? Each alternative had its champions. Each was printed in journals, cited, debated. But none survived contact with the full evidence. The interstellar fragment explained chemistry, but not rhythm. The stellar relic explained metals, but not trajectory. The rogue fragment explained volatility, but not timing. The exotic body explained diversity, but not coincidence. Each was a shard of explanation, never the whole. Each bent under the same weight, the pile of anomalies that pointed not to chance, but to choice. And when every natural story fails, what story is left? To the public, these alternatives sounded desperate. Cosmic collisions, rogue worlds, exotic classes. They carried awe, but not clarity. They felt like theatre, attempts to keep the word probe locked behind glass. People noticed. Forums dissected them. Journalists asked sharper questions. If every new hypothesis contradicted the last, how could any of them be trusted? If scientists kept multiplying possibilities, didn't that prove that none of them worked? Suspicion thrived in the gaps. And in those gaps, the darker answer spread. Maybe the alternatives were not wrong in detail, but wrong in principle. Maybe the anomaly was not natural at all. If all the natural answers break, what unnatural truth waits in the silence? Even among scientists, the alternatives grew thin. Improbable, but possible, they wrote. Unlikely, but consistent. Phrases that betray doubt, phrases that reveal caution. No one dared to say what many thought. That design explained better than chance. Because to say it aloud was to risk ridicule, to spark panic, to open a door that cannot be closed. Safer to keep adding theories, even broken ones. Safer to keep the mask of nature intact, even when the mask itself looked cracked. And yet, beneath all this, the fear spread, because alternatives are meant to reassure, to anchor the unknown in the framework of science. But here, the alternatives only made the fear sharper. They showed that even stretched to their breaking point, natural law could not contain 3I Atlas. The anomalies were too stacked, too patterned, too precise. Each hypothesis fell away, leaving behind the shadow it was meant to hide. Because when coincidence collapses, only intention remains. For the first time, the mystery of 3I Atlas escaped the realm of science and became a question for humanity itself. Telescopes had captured the flare. Amateurs had confirmed the pulse. The data was no longer locked behind observatory doors. Anyone with a screen could see it. Anyone with curiosity could download the graphs. And once the evidence left the ivory towers, it could not be controlled. News outlets called it the heartbeat comet. Social media named it the moon flare. Commentators framed it as a cosmic message. Conspiracy channels declared it alien without hesitation. What began as a scientific anomaly became, overnight, a cultural event. And when anomalies become culture, no government can contain them. The media split instantly. Mainstream anchors repeated the official line, natural, rare, nothing to fear. But the images spoke louder than words. Clips of the flare showed a green haze, twisting like a living thing beside the moon. Light curves replayed like a heartbeat monitor on endless loops. The public did not need explanations. They saw rhythm with their own eyes. Late-night hosts mocked the reassurances. Talk radio fumed about cover-ups. Even respectable journalists asked the dangerous question. If this was ordinary, why did it look extraordinary? Governments scrambled. The Pentagon held late-night meetings with NASA. European ministers demanded hourly updates from ESA. China's military took control of telescope data streams. Russia quietly shifted orbital surveillance assets to track the object. Publicly, officials parroted calm. Privately, they asked terrifying questions. Could 3I Atlas change course again? Could it break apart? Could fragments strike Earth? If it was artificial, what was its purpose? And worst of all, if it was artificial, were we already too late? What defense exists against something moving faster than any weapon ever built? Religion, too, responded. Preachers called it a sign from God. Some said it was an angel, others a warning. Pilgrims gathered at shrines to pray under the moon, convinced they were witnessing prophecy. In temples, mosques, and churches, sermons wove 3I Atlas into scripture, folding anomaly into faith. Others saw it differently, not a sign of God, but of gods long forgotten, returning in silence. Myths of sky watchers and star gods were dredged from the past. Ancient texts gained new interpretations. Was this the return of something humanity once knew, now forgotten, now revealed in a flare of light? Conspiracies flourished. Forums claimed the flare was a weapon test. Others swore it was the first stage of contact, hidden by governments who already knew more. Amateur astronomers accused agencies of scrubbing data. Images were dissected, enhanced, distorted. Every silence from officials was seen as proof of cover-up. Every calm word was read as coded fear. Theories spread faster than facts, because theories offered what facts could not: answers. And people crave answers more than truth. If the truth is silence, will humanity always fill it with its own noise? Art responded as well. Musicians released songs titled Pulse of the Moon. Painters captured the flare as a glowing scar in the sky. Filmmakers pitched scripts of alien probes and silent watchers. Writers flooded shelves with novels imagining what 3I Atlas really was. In the absence of certainty, creativity bloomed. Humanity has always turned fear into story, and here, fear was fertile ground. Yet even in art, the same question echoed. Why here? Why now? Why us? But the most unsettling response was psychological. For ordinary people, the idea that a comet pulsed at the moon was not terrifying in itself. The terror came from the gap from scientists insisting it was natural while admitting they could not explain. From governments calming with one hand and classifying with the other. From the growing sense that something was being hidden, even if nothing was. The absence of certainty felt like betrayal. And betrayal breeds paranoia. What happens when humanity no longer trusts its own keepers of truth? Markets quivered. Aerospace stocks spiked. Tourism dipped as doomsday predictions trended. Tech firms promised new sensors, new models, new defenses. Politicians promised transparency while demanding secrecy in the same breath. Humanity's response fractured into factions: believers in the natural, believers in the alien, believers in conspiracy, and those too exhausted to care. The object itself did not change. Only our perception did, and that perception reshaped the world more than the flare itself ever could. For scientists, the weight grew unbearable. Some doubled down, insisting every anomaly could be explained by chaos. Others cracked, admitting privately that nothing made sense. A few whispered to colleagues what they could never print. That probe was the simplest explanation, not proof, but fit. And yet they stayed silent in public, because to speak it aloud was to ignite fire. The human response, more than the comet, had become the danger. Because fear, once unleashed, moves faster than any rock from the stars. And through it all, 3I Atlas drifted on, silent, unchanging, unconcerned with the chaos it stirred. It did not flare again. It did not pulse again. It only glowed faintly, a green haze against black sky, as if watching, as if waiting. Humanity screamed, prayed, argued, created, doubted. The object remained what it always was, a mystery. And perhaps that was the cruelest response of all, because in the end, humanity's reaction revealed more about us than about it. Fear, faith, creativity, denial, the whole spectrum laid bare by one flare at the moon. And if this is how we fracture over one anomaly, what happens if another follows? In the end, we are left with silence. 3. I-Atlas has crossed the Earth-Moon system and drifts onward, green haze fading into black. The flare is gone, the pulse has stopped. The trajectory remains unchanged. To the eye, it is once again just another faint light among countless others. Yet the questions it left behind do not fade. They deepen, because no answer has held. Natural explanations cracked under weight. Alternative hypotheses bent until they broke. Theories multiplied, contradictions spread, certainty dissolved. What remains is the mystery itself and the sense that something vast has brushed against us. What happened near the moon may never be explained, but can it ever be forgotten? We know what we saw. A flare timed not to the sun, but to the moon. Rhythms no chaos should mimic, chemistry no geology should produce. A trajectory too precise for chance. Each anomaly alone could be dismissed. Together, they demand meaning, and meaning is what we fear most. Because if it was coincidence, then coincidence has begun to look like choreography. And if it was intention, then who or what was the choreographer? Science tells us patience will solve it. More data, more study, more missions. But patience is cold comfort when anomalies refuse to shrink. If 3I Atlas was natural, we should be able to model it. Yet our models break. If it was artificial, we should be able to prove it. Yet proof eludes us. We are trapped in a space between certainty and speculation, where silence echoes louder than answers. Is silence the truth, or is silence the mask? Humanity's reaction revealed as much as the object. Fear flared faster than gas. Faith filled gaps with prophecy. Conspiracy filled them with paranoia. Artists turned it into story. Governments turned it into secrecy. And through it all, 3I Atlas remained indifferent. It did not respond to our questions, our prayers, our fears. It only moved on, as if untouched by the chaos it left behind. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson. The universe is not obliged to answer us. We may scream into the void, and the void may never scream back. Yet the questions burn. What if the flare was not chance, but signal? What if the pulse was not rhythm, but code? What if the moon was not coincidence, but trigger? We are left with what we cannot prove, but cannot dismiss. To ignore it is denial. To accept it is terror. And so we balance between the two, telling ourselves stories, each one incomplete. Perhaps 3I Atlas is a ghost, a relic of a civilization lost to the great filter, still wandering long after its makers are gone. Perhaps it is a seed, a gardener's tool planting atmospheres across barren worlds. Perhaps it is a sentinel, a watcher, disguised in dust, scanning and recording without ever revealing its gaze. Or perhaps it is only a comet, strange but natural, a mirror reflecting our fears back at us. But if it is only a comet, Why does it not look like one? The truth is that we do not know, and that ignorance is heavier than fear, because every possibility carries weight. If it is natural, then nature is stranger than we imagined. If it is artificial, then we are not alone. If it is a relic, then civilizations do not survive. If it is a seed, then we are crops. If it is a watcher, then we are already seen. Which of these futures can humanity bear to face? And so the question lingers, heavier than the object itself. Coincidence or contact? Chaos or choreography? Ghost or gardener? The universe will not answer. The object will not speak. It will drift on, fading into darkness, leaving us with silence, and the silence will demand interpretation. Because perhaps the true anomaly is not 3i Atlas at all. Perhaps the anomaly is us, daring to look at the night sky and believe we are ready for the answers.